Friday the 13th, the day you count on for terror. With 12 films in the franchise, many actors and filmmakers have been a part of the series. Therefore, I have compiled a list of horror movies that feature actors or filmmakers that have been a part of a Friday the 13th film. Join us now as we list 13 horror movies that feature Friday the 13th alumni. But before we begin, be sure to slash that like button and make sure you're subscribed, as we're always posting horror-related content and we'll be bringing you more lists just like this one. So put down the machete, grab yourself some popcorn, and enjoy. Deep Star 6 from 1989. From one of the original creators of the Friday the 13th franchise brings us a deep sea monster movie. A Navy team stationed at a seafloor base to set up nuclear missiles uncovers a massive underwater cavern. When they investigate, they inadvertently unleash a giant prehistoric creature. Deep Star 6 is directed by Friday the 13th alum Sean S. Cunningham, who directed the original 1980 film. The music is composed by Harry Manfredini, the composer behind 9 entries in the Friday the 13th franchise. Deep Star 6 stars Ron Carroll, who you might remember as Sergeant Tyranny at the very end of the original Friday the 13th, delivering his memorable line, "Ma'am, we didn't find any boy." Deep Star 6 also stars Miguel Ferrer of RoboCop fame and Matt McCoy, who fans of Seinfeld will remember as Lloyd Braun. Deep Star 6 is a fun creature feature with a little bit of a sci-fi twist. Though it's set at the bottom of the ocean, the high-tech 80s computers and gadgets often give it a space-like feel. Although the monster doesn't show up until late in the movie, the creature is a giant practical effect and animatronic-like monster that makes for a scary good time. Tremors from 1990. The small town of Perfection, Nevada defends themselves against worm-like creatures lurking beneath the ground, picking off townsfolk one by one. Tremors stars Friday the 13th alum Kevin Bacon, who played Jack in the original film, and met his end courtesy of Pamela Voorhees with an unforgettable arrow through the neck scene. It also features the late, great Fred Ward, the ever awesome Michael Gross, who would go on to become the face of the Tremors franchise, and, fun fact, my stepmom's favorite country singer, Reba McEntire, in her film debut. Tremors is a standout creature feature with a stellar cast and blends its humor and horror brilliantly. The special effects in Tremors are top-notch and refreshingly free of CGI. The giant worm creatures, known as graboids within the film, are brought to life with an impressive mix of practical effects and miniatures. Released a decade after the original Friday the 13th, Tremors really shows how far Kevin Bacon had come as an actor. In 1980, he had a small role, but here he takes center stage as Valentine, one of the film's lead characters. If you haven't seen Tremors, I highly recommend checking it out. I used to watch it a lot as a kid, and honestly, it still holds up. It's funny, imaginative, and scary, but also has a charm that most modern horror films lack. Lake Placid from 1999. A group of unlikely allies must work together to stop a giant crocodile who is terrorizing a remote lake in Maine. Lake Placid is directed by Friday the 13th alum Steve Miner, who helmed parts 2 and 3 of the franchise, and just a year before directed Halloween H2O. The film stars Bridget Fonda, known for Single White Female, Bill Pullman, who famously played the president in Independence Day, and Oliver Platt, aka Jimmy King himself, and of course, the legendary Betty White. Although the film is directed by Steve Miner, he does make a small cameo as the airline pilot. Lake Placid is another fun creature feature with the perfect blend of horror and humor. The main group of characters are constantly bickering with one another, and their banter is quite entertaining. The crocodile is a mix of practical effects and CGI. Some shots hold up better than others, but overall the visual effects never take away from how entertaining the film is. If you are in the mood for a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, has fun with the concept of a giant crocodile, but still delivers a satisfying horror story, Lake Placid is worth the watch. April Fool's Day from 1986. 9 college students are invited to a friend's remote island mansion for an April Fool's Day weekend getaway. However, an unseen killer begins picking them off one by one. But is there something more going on than as it seems? April Fool's Day stars Friday the 13th alum Amy Steele, best known for her role as Final Girl Guinea in Part 2. Rounding out the cast is Ken Olent, who you might remember from the awesome Summer School from 1987 and the original Leprechaun, along with Tom Wilson, better known as Biff from the Back to the Future trilogy. As a bonus for Friday the 13th fans, keep an eye out for a character named Buck, played by Michael Nomad. He also appeared in Part 6, Jason Lives, as Officer Thornton, the unlucky guy who gets a dart to the head. Fun fact, Nomad also served as the stunt coordinator for Part 6 as well. Amy Steele brings the same charm to Kit as she did with Guinea. It's a shame she didn't appear in more 80s horror films. She truly had the potential to become one of the decade's biggest genre stars. April Fool's Day is a great 80s slasher with a clever twist, and while you might already know what that twist is, trust me, there's a bit more to it than you would expect. Sweet 16 from 1983. Sweet 16 follows a teenage girl named Melissa. After each of her encounters with a local boy from her small town, he is found murdered shortly after. But who is the killer? This slasher features the classic whodunit twist to keep you guessing, only showing the killer's hands until the final reveal. Sweet 16 stars Friday the 13th alum Donna Kimmel, who starred as the final girl Chris just a year prior in Friday the 13th Part 3. The cast also includes Don Shanks, who would go on to play Michael Myers himself in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers in 1989. While Elisa Shirley takes the lead as Melissa, Donna Kimmel still holds a prominent role in the film as she aids her father, the town sheriff, in unraveling the murder mystery. Sweet 16 may not rack up the body count one would expect of an 80s slasher, but it does offer a compelling mystery and isn't afraid to tackle sensitive themes like racial prejudice and bullying. And hey, I gotta say, the poster's pretty awesome too. The Prowler from 1981. A killer stalks a small California town, determined to relive a 35-year-old double murder by targeting college kids during a graduation dance. The Prowler is directed by Friday the 13th alum Joseph Zito, who helmed Part 4, the final chapter. The gruesome special effects come courtesy of horror legend Tom Savini, the mastermind behind the effects in both the original Friday the 13th and the final chapter. Rounding out the cast are Christopher Goutman as Mark London, the deputy sheriff left in charge while the sheriff's away on a fishing trip, and Vicki Dawson in the lead role as Pam. Of all the 80s films on this list, The Prowler probably comes closest to capturing that Friday the 13th vibe, which makes no surprise that director Joseph Zito was later tapped to helm the final chapter. If you're in the mood for some gory, old-school 80s slasher fun and haven't seen it yet, The Prowler is worth a watch. Massacre at Central High from 1976. Tormented by ruthless bullies, a high school student strikes back with deadly force, then turns on anyone who dares to follow in their footsteps. Massacre at Central High features Friday the 13th alum Kimberly Beck, who played Trish Jarvis, Tommy's older sister and the final girl in Part 4, the final chapter. Another notable cast member is a young Robert Carradine, who would later become known for his memorable character Lewis in 1984's Revenge of the Nerds. While Kimberly Beck isn't one of the main leads, she's featured often, and you definitely see a lot of her throughout the film. Her character is involved in a bit of a love triangle, adding some extra spice to the story. The movie isn't the over-the-top gore fest one might expect with the word massacre prominently featured in the title, but it does mix an after-school teen drama, sexuality, and violent exploitation horror while tackling heavy themes like bullying. As long as you know this going into it, I think you'll have some fun with it. Willard from 2003. A man discovers he has a strange connection with the rats in his basement and soon begins using them to carry out his dark desires. Willard stars Friday the 13th alum Crispin Glover, who played Jimmy in Part 4, the final chapter, and met his demise at the hands of Jason with a well-placed meat cleaver. Directed by Glenn Morgan, who also helmed the good remake of Black Christmas in 2006, the film stars the late R. Lee Ermey, best known for his memorable role in Full Metal Jacket and as Sheriff Hoyt in the 2003 remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its 2006 prequel. Willard is a remake of the 1971 film of the same name. However, both versions are based on the novel Ratman's Notebooks by Stephen Gilbert. Although the film centers on a man who controls rats and commits some dark acts, at its heart, it's a tragic story about a lonely man who finds friendship in Socrates, an albino rat. Crispin Glover delivers a standout performance in this bizarre, underrated film, and that alone makes it worth at least a rental for any Friday the 13th fan. Much like Kevin Bacon, it's fun to see Crispin Glover go from being brutally offed while searching for the corkscrew to carrying a film as the title character. Fair warning though, if scenes involving animal deaths are upsetting to you, this one might not be for you. The Return of the Living Dead from 1985. Two employees at a medical supply warehouse accidentally release a toxic gas, one that brings the dead back to life. Return of the Living Dead features several Friday the 13th alumni, including Tom Matthews, who played the adult Tommy Jarvis in Part 6, Jason Lives, Miguel Nunez Jr., who played Demon in Part 5, A New Beginning, and Mark Venturini, who appeared as Victor in the same film. Rounding out the cast is Clu Gulager as Bert, who you might remember from A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and the Feast trilogy, and horror icon Leanna Quigley, most known for her memorable role in the great Halloween horror Night of the Demons. With 3 Friday the 13th alumni in the cast, This film is a real treat for fans of the franchise. Tom Matthews shines in the lead role as Freddy, while Miguel Nunez Jr. brings energy to Spider, a character who starts off in the background but steps up in a big way later in the film. Mark Venturini is almost unrecognizable here. It's easy to forget he's the same guy from Part 5 who wouldn't take the candy bar from Joey. Return of the Living Dead is a horror masterpiece, and honestly, it's tough to write something in just a couple of hundred words. The film strikes a perfect balance between humor and horror. The humor never feels over the top, and when the horrors hit, it's raw and gritty. As a kid, Tarman especially freaked me out. Sure, it's a zombie movie, but it's the zombie movie that cemented the idea in pop culture that zombies ate only brains and groaned brains as they shamble about. Return of the Living Dead has something for everyone, with a cast of characters from all walks of life. It's fun, wildly entertaining, and backed by a killer soundtrack. How could anyone not like this movie? Well, it's not a bad question, Bert. Slumber Party Massacre 2 from 1987. Courtney and her bandmates head to a condo for a weekend getaway, but she can't shake the haunting feeling that a rockabilly driller killer is coming for them all. Slumber Party Massacre 2 features Friday the 13th alums Juliette Cummins, who played Robin in Part 5, A New Beginning, and Heidi Kozak-Haddad, who appeared as Sandra in Part 7, The New Blood. Rounding out the cast are Crystal Bernard as lead character Courtney, Kimberly MacArthur as Amy, and Atanas Illich as the driller killer. As I mentioned before, the four women are in a band. While Juliette Cummins isn't the lead character of the film, she takes center stage as the band's lead singer and bass player, especially during the two musical scenes in the film. Whether she's actually singing or lip-syncing is unclear, but she owns the moment regardless. Heidi Kozak-Haddad plays the drums, and as a drummer myself, I've gotta say, usually it's painfully obvious when someone doesn't know what they're doing behind the kit, but she does a pretty convincing job. Slumber Party Massacre 2 is completely ridiculous and over the top, and I mean that in the best way possible. The rockabilly driller killer will have you grinning more than screaming, and that's part of the fun. There are some clever nods too, like the two cops named Officer Kruger and Officer Voorhees. Interesting choice of names, makes you wonder if they've ever gone toe-to-toe off duty. It's pure 80s camp with a cheesy charm, and honestly, what more could you ask for? Highway to Hell from 1991. When his girlfriend is kidnapped and taken to hell to become one of Satan's brides, Charlie must journey into the underworld on a daring quest to save her. Highway to Hell stars Friday the 13th alum C.J. Graham, best known as Jason Voorhees in Part 6, Jason Lives. This time he plays Hellcop, also known as Sergeant Bedlam. Chad Lowe plays Charlie Sykes, while his girlfriend Rachel is played by Christy Swanson, the original Buffy from my childhood. The film also features cameo appearances from rock musician Lita Ford, Jerry Stiller, best known as George's dad on Seinfeld, and a young Ben Stiller. For Friday the 13th fans, seeing C.J. Graham as Hellcop is a real treat. He may not be the lead, but every time he's on screen, he steals the show. It's a shame C.J. Graham didn't do more horror. His turn as Jason in Part 6 was his only 80s role, and Hellcop marked his only appearance in the 90s. Highway to Hell is a campy cult classic horror comedy that is definitely not for everyone. It's no masterpiece, but if you're in the mood for a fun, outrageous ride, this one delivers. Hatchet from 2006. A group of tourists on a haunted swamp tour in New Orleans find their night of fun spiraling into horror after their boat crashes, leaving them stranded and hunted by a deranged killer. Hatchet stars Friday the 13th alum Kane Hodder, who played Jason Voorhees in parts 7, 8, Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X. Joining him behind the scenes is the late John Carl Buechler, director and effects wizard of Part 7, The New Blood, who brings his special effects magic to Hatchet and even makes a fun cameo appearance. The cast features Joel David Moore, who I'll always remember as JP from Grandma's Boy, and Dion Richmond from Scream 3. Horror fans are also treated to cameo appearances by genre legends Robert Englund and the late Tony Todd. If you don't know who they are, well, let's just say you've got some essential horror viewing to catch up on. Kane Hodder plays the Jason-esque Victor Crowley in this blood-soaked slasher. There are 4 Hatchet films as of this recording, and honestly, you could watch any of them just for Kane Hodder and the kills. But for the sake of this list, we're sticking with the original. Hatchet doesn't hold a candle to any of the Friday the 13th films. But if you shut your brain off and watch for the gory kills, it can still be a bloody good time. And when I say gory, I mean gory. It might be low budget, but they definitely didn't cheap out on the special effects. The Crazies from 2010. When a mysterious virus turns the residents of a quiet Iowa farming town into violent killers, the local sheriff pieces together what's happening and teams up with a few survivors to fight for their lives. This 2010 film is a remake of the 1973 original, directed by horror icon George A. Romero. The Crazies stars Friday the 13th alum Danielle Panabaker, who appeared as Jenna in the 2009 remake. The main cast also includes Timothy Olyphant, known for Scream 2 and A Perfect Getaway, and Radha Mitchell, who starred in Silent Hill and Sacrifice from 2016. Danielle Panabaker may not be one of the main leads, but she is present in several intense moments throughout the film, especially the memorable car wash scene. One could argue that this is one of those rare cases where the remake actually outshines the original. Packed with suspense and brutal moments, The Crazies is a relentless thrill ride that never lets up. Well, that's our list. Have you seen any of these movies? What do you think of them? If you have any horror movie recommendations that feature Friday the 13th alumni, let us know in the comments. Perhaps it will end up on the next list. Once again, don't forget to subscribe for more horror-related content like this. Until next time.